A lot of people had things to say about Prince Harry's story last week, so I wanted to read a couple of comments. So Lee says, private security guards in Great Britain are forbidden from bearing arms. Only the police can provide armed security. This is another consideration in this case, which may be a reason why Prince Harry wanted private security when he is over there.
Yeah, no question. Obviously, we know here in the United States, because of the Second Amendment, we have very lenient gun laws, which means that private citizens can carry guns, and there are obviously a few restrictions, but if you're not a felon, if you're a U.S. citizen, you're over 18, you can have a gun. So that also applies to private security. That does not hold true in other countries. In many other countries, it's just law enforcement and the military that can have firearms. So I understand that that's a consideration on the prince's part, but it doesn't change the legal analysis. You either have a right to hire uniformed police officers and pay them, or you don't. And in the UK, you don't if you're a private citizen.
Got it. All right. So the Trinity says in many countries in Europe, police is not for hire. Harry may have wanted to pay for it, but it's unfair to mobilize resources to the detriment of taxpayers. This would set a precedent by allowing rich people hire the police for their own protection. When you're a celebrity, you use your own money to protect yourself. Harry would not be in this predicament if he didn't quit his duties to be financially independent. Rules are for everyone, including Harry. I think this has to do with his IPP status, that he wants back to have all taxpayers around the world to cover his security costs instead of his own pocket.
Yeah, so this is something that's also unique to the United States, right? We have a federal system. So you have federal law enforcement, you have state law enforcement, you have local, and different rules apply to them. When we talked last week, I said, you can't hire the FBI, you can't hire the Secret Service, but even though you may be able to hire state and local police officers here in the United States, well, in other countries, you don't usually have these layers of different police officers, right? Because you don't have states, generally the police, there's one police force, and there's one rule that applies to the police force, which is why you kind of have different laws here in the United States.
Got it. All right. Well, moving over to his other legal issues, which has to do with his visa. We've talked about this several times, but it seems like there's an interesting development in the case. So the U.S. government will appear in court next week to answer questions about his visa application after a conservative think tank demanded that it be unsealed, given his admitted drug use. So the Department of Homeland Security will face off on June 6th against the Heritage Foundation, which filed a Freedom of Information Act lawsuit earlier this month to compel the agency to release his immigration records, assuming because they are of immense public interest. So far, the government has refused to make his visa application public, but that the hearing will be in D.C. federal court and open to the press. So are you surprised that this case has gotten this far?
I am, Christina, because we know that immigration files generally aren't public. And obviously there's a Freedom of Information Act. States have similar versions of Public Records Act. And this is something that, frankly, I did not think would get this far, but a judge is going to apparently hear the case, see if the Heritage Foundation has a basis to really see Prince Harry's immigration file. Because, of course, as we discussed, drug use, either past or present, generally is a bar to admissibility. And we know that the prince just has a visa. So typically, for private citizens, if you're an admitted drug user, you can't be in the United States. And another issue for the prince is, obviously, he's traveling back and forth to the UK. Even if they haven't done anything yet, when he comes back to the United States, Customs and Border Protection, just like you do when you enter the United States, they're going to ask you questions. They ask about his drug use, and he's admitted to using drugs. He may still be barred going forward, even though he's not being removed now.
Wow. So there's a chance if he comes here, he might not be able to, if he leaves the United States, he might not be able to return.
Exactly. So the question is, are they going to actually, arrest him and remove him and deport him from the country? Probably not. But when you're trying to re-enter, he may run into problems because of his admissions.
Interesting. Yeah, because I feel like we've talked about this story quite a bit, and we never thought that it would really get this far. So can these immigration records, will maybe they be made public since it is immense public interest, and now that this is going to be before a judge?
There's certainly a possibility. We're certainly a lot closer there than we were a week ago. It's really going to depend on what that judge does in DC. And I'm sure the government is going to take it up on appeal. I know DHS, I used to work with Ali Mayorkas, who's the head of DHS, Biden's cabinet level appointee. And I'm certain that they're going to do everything they can to kind of keep these records private, not because of anything problematic with the prince, but just generally speaking, I know how the department and the United States government operates. They usually take a stance in these cases just for legal precedent across the board, not with respect to one individual case.
So if you're Prince Harry and his legal team, are you a little nervous at this point?
A little bit. If I'm the prince, I start talking to doctors, because one of the exceptions to inadmissibility for drug use is if you're in remission. And so he's going to need a physician to say that, even though he used drugs, he's no longer using it, and the legal standard is being in remission. Again, it requires a physician certification. So I would certainly want to make sure I have that teed up if I'm the prince, because I'm going to want to stay here in the United States. The other thing, of course, you can do is start that green card process. When he's married to a U.S. citizen, if you're planning to stay here truly and living in the United States in Montecito here in Southern California for the rest of your life, get that process going. You don't want to be here just on a visa.
Right. So it seems like he almost has to make a decision if he's a permanent resident or not. Will this affect his green card application at all as well?
Absolutely. I mean, here's someone, if you make a false statement in support of an immigration application, I mean, that's also a grounds for inadmissibility. So you can't be a drug user unless you're in remission, and you also can't be lying on your application saying you're not a drug user when you're admitting to doing so in a book. So he's going to have to be careful about how he deals with this. And we know the prince gives us a lot of material here on Legally Us, right? Every week he has some sort of legal issue. So you better consult with his immigration attorneys and make sure he's very careful about what he says.
There's no chance on June 6th that they could be like, okay, Prince Harry, you're going to be deported after seeing what they see, right?
I don't think so, because that's something that the Department of Homeland Security has to do. They have to take action, right? I mean, we're seeing this right now, for instance, with former President Trump, right? There's people that want him to be prosecuted. There's people that want, President Biden, Hunter Biden, Hillary Clinton to be prosecuted. It's really up to the government to decide who's prosecuted or not. What's going to happen, though, is that immigration file may be made public, and that will be very telling.
For more news, content, and exclusive interviews, make sure to hit the sub, like, and bell button down below and visit usmagazine.com.